Welcome to Dr. Lottie Science with Soul. I'm Dr. Lottie and the host of this podcast. I'm a physician, medical intuitive, evidential psychic medium, international keynote speaker, and author of Med School After Menopause, The Journey of My Soul, an inspirational story about transformation, healing, and spirituality, which won first place in the category of spiritual leadership in August 2021 from Living Now Book Awards. This award recognizes truly world-changing books that contribute to positive global change. The inspiration for this podcast came from my own life experiences. As I have journeyed through life, it has taught me that we're part of a greater divine web of interconnectedness. I have walked the path of illness, healing, and transformation. After 2 near-death experiences, I became clairvoyant, clairaudient, and clairsentient, and was guided to attend medical school at the age of 54. We will be meeting with many different types of doctors, healers, as well as spiritual leaders, educators, and other inspiring souls in this podcast. It is my hope that you will gain information and create a path to healing your own life physically, emotionally, and spiritually, and bridge the gap between science and soul. If you are a person who understands the interconnectedness of mind, body, and soul, and would like to take one of my courses or work with me to create a path of healing your own life, please visit divinespiritualessence.com or drlottie.com. To stay up to date on future episodes and to help us reach a larger audience, remember to subscribe, review, and share this podcast, as well as subscribing to my newsletter at divinespiritualessence.com. Welcome to Dr. Lottie Science with Soul. I'm Dr. Lottie and the host of this podcast. Today, I'm really delighted to have Felicia Bender back to share her knowledge of numerology with all of you again. And Felicia Bender, Ph.D., the Practical Numerologist, is devoted to helping audiences uncover their life's purpose and so much more with numerology. She's the author of Redesign Your Life, using numerology to create the wildly optimal you, as well as Master Numbers 11, 22, 33, the ultimate guide. Felicia is also the resident numerologist for AstroStyle and is featured in many media outlets, including Refinery 29, Women's Health, Elephant Journal, and much more. So welcome, Felicia. I'm so excited to have you back on the podcast.
Oh, it is just like coming home to you, Dr. Lottie. It's so wonderful. So wonderful to see you.
That's great. And we were chatting here beforehand what to discuss today. And Felicia said, a great topic today would be to talk about the universal year and what that is. What is the meaning of the universal year? So what are we coming out of having lived through 2021? And what are we to expect going into 2022? So maybe you could start by just even explaining what the universal year is.
Absolutely. And I find it's really interesting because often I'll just dive right in and then I realize that not everyone knows even what numerology is, right? So everyone's heard a little of astrology, but numerology still, it's something about numbers and all of that. So just to give people a bit of a context that numerology basically is an art and a science. And the kind I use comes from Pythagoras. It's, I don't know if anyone out there remembers the Pythagorean Theorem of geometry in math class. So if you do out there, it is the same guy, Greek mystic and mathematician. He had he would have been a really interesting guy to kind of have dinner with, right? He, music, astronomy, astrology, all of these things, but basically posits this idea that numbers carry with them not only a quantitative value, right, like 1 apple, 2 apples, and so on, but that numbers carry with them a vibration and a frequency. And within that is contained data, or I like to say it's code, right? And we can kind of willingly suspend our disbelief at this point in our lives because we're in this technological numerological world where everything is data, everything. I mean, and it is kind of like, the cloud, like, what is that, right? It's supposed to be up there somewhere. And it's carrying every bit and byte of data that was ever, produced on the planet. I mean, seriously, that's a little mind-blowing if you think about it.
Yeah.
Where is that? Cell phone reception, even gravity? We don't have to believe in it for it to be operational. So basically, the idea is that numerology carries this sort of information. It carries data and has an influence on and an impact on us, both individually, each individual person on the planet, and then also in other aspects and ways that we can look at it, like globally, right? So in numerology, we will actually we can look at things from a microcosmic or a macrocosmic lens. And if we're working just with our individual selves, we use our birth date, our full date of birth, and our full name as it appears on our birth certificate. And then we can calculate an entire map of what you're here to do, when you're going to do it, all of these different elements of guidance for us. So to me, it's kind of like Morse code, right? It's kind of like you walk into a room and and if you don't know Morse code, it's just the static. And if you do know Morse code, you walk in and you can understand what messages and what information is being relayed. So when you can read the numbers, you actually can understand what messaging is coming through for us. And it's there, we just have to know the language. So with that, we're looking not today at our personal profile, our personal purpose and everything of being here, but what we're going to do is look at a cycle of time. So we have cycles that we can look at in numerology, and the universal year is one of them. So it's an umbrella energy, I feel, that is encompasses all of us universally on the globe. It is a global energy that we feel. And it's a very easy calculation. We just simply take the year that we are either in, if that's what we're looking at, or that we're coming up to, which is what we're also looking at today. So 2022, and we take it as a very simple math problem, 2 plus 0 plus 2 plus 2 equals 6. So we are moving into a number 6 universal year. So so what, right? so now what? Now how do we look at this? So it's kind of like, again, numerologically, we can look at this. It's kind of like the road trip that we're going on. It's like the overall picture. And then numerologically, we can digit down and to another cycle of time called the personal year cycle. I know you and I have spoken about that and on a prior podcast that you've done about how this affects us very individually. So that's something that's more immediate. But this is more of everyone on the planet is going to be immersed in this energy and guided by it. And we can see it in our what's going on politically. We can see it environmentally. We can see what's going on socially. And we can put that into context in a global way, and how the numerology can really inform us about how to focus our efforts, how to understand the basic components of what might be going on during this particular year. And so during a 6 personal year, the key concepts are our home, where we feel at home, what is home to us. It's about relationships. It's service, it's duty, it's responsibility, it's family, and it's a very nurturing, very in many ways self-sacrificing energy that goes with the number 6 numerologically, and it's also quite a supportive of visionary pursuits in many ways. So these are the key concepts and the key themes that we'll be working with in 2022.
Wow, that's just fascinating. So when you look at where we're going into in 2022, what are we coming out of now being in 2021?
Yes, well, that's always a good thing to see what we're bridging from and into, right? And so 2021, again, 2 plus 0 plus 2 plus 1, that is a 5. So we have collectively been in a number 5 universal year. So what has that brought to the table in many ways, shapes, and forms, right? Is the basic theme for this year has been freedom. The 5 is all about freedom. It's about fun, sensuousness. It's catalytic energy. When it shows up, things are changing. there's there's none of this back in the day. It's always what's next. What are we progressing into? It's very it's going to bring us into facing our fears collectively. It's going to, when we're dealing with numerology, I always like to point out that the numbers carry with them an optimal quality or theme. It's great to know these theme words to keep coming back to. And yet we're always going to be dealing with the oppositional pole, right? Either the overactive or the underactive of that. So with the 5 universal year this year in 2021 that we're just leaving or going to be leaving soon, is it's been about fearlessness. The 5 is all about, facing your fears. So that's been a big one on the priority poll this year for us collectively. What is our biggest fear individually and collectively? And I think that we're pretty much in it, right? Aren't we? With global pandemic, with everything that has been in the tailwind of that. And it's about, again, sensuousness, sex, all of those pleasures of life that have been restricted and that people are longing for and going out and risking for this year, very much so. And again, because it's about freedom, it's about restriction. How do we deal with restriction? When do we feel tethered? When we feel we've lost our sovereignty? How do we manage that? And the highest kind of, to me, octave of the 5 is a higher level of, not to be too corny about it, but this spiritual self-awareness, this kind of transcendence into what is true freedom. I mean, can you feel free when you're incarcerated? Can you gain a sense of freedom of mind, freedom of spirit, no matter how restrictive your current container might be? So those are, some deeper issues I feel that we have all collectively been working with very, very intensely. And it's about travel and adventure. And people are attempting, really longing for that right now in 2021. Some have been able to do it and some haven't. So it all depends on the fear factor and restrictions, depending on where we are globally, because it's very different wherever we are in the world and on the planet. And, again, we can look at this politically, how things have been playing out as well. So those are the things that have been happening, or the thematics for 2021.
Wow, it's fascinating because you can sort of predict how the world is going to change going into the next year and what's coming. Now, how does that universal year relate back to each person, and how does that then relate back to each person's life path number or personal year?
Absolutely. And so, not to get too diffuse about it. And yet we're always, again, the universal year is a wonderful thing to know collectively. So how that, the basic flow of how things will be going. And again, it's not a crystal ball, right? Because there's so many different ways to express these things and to engage with them. And what I mean by that is, for me, this upcoming year, 2022, first of all, has a lot of 2s. So if you look 2, 0, 2, 2, numerologically, that does have a significance. because when you have repeated numbers, they gain momentum, they gain power, they gain an imprint with them and influence, right? And the zero actually in numerology can be considered what I would call an amplifier. So whenever it shows up in this series of numbers that we have right now, 2022, is amplifying whatever it's around, and that's the 2. So for me, this is going to be a very significant year because it's going to have some different layers to it. It's going to be like a layer cake, with some different flavors of sponge, and the flavor, I think, within the frosting of the 6, which we'll go a little bit more into in a moment, but the layers are going to be layered with number 2 energy that comes from the number 2, and the 2 is all about love, partnerships, relationships. It's very emotionally attuned. It is about patience and developing patience. It is the number of diplomacy. Boy, could we use some of that, right? Some diplomacy, mediation. It's conflict avoidant, and yet also meant to dive in there and mediate and be with conflict and be able to step in someone else's shoes and navigate and mediate a win-win outcome for the whole, right? For the community, for the group. It's not about someone winning and someone losing. It's about how can we come to compromise? How can we play this game together, right? Rather than having a winner and a loser. So this energy is going to be a very foundational thematic, I find, coming into this 2022, because it's laying the groundwork and is I would even say it's at the core or the heart and soul of this energy. And it is heart and soul energy, is the 2. So it's wonderfully ironic and yet not. And yet it's like, the numbers never lie. It's that funny thing. It's like you can wish they would lie sometimes, but they never do. So this is really going to be at the heart and soul, the foundation here. And yet how it's going to express is through the 6. And the 6 is, I feel overarchingly this is going to be a year 2022 of kind of global revisioning. And I'm not being a super psychic or anything, a sparkly unicorn right now to say that this is really where we're headed with politically. We've got a lot of refugees. We've got some wars. We've got a lot of disagreements. We've got the splintering of people through politics, through what's been going on with vaccinations and not vaccinations, with the pandemic, not with all the restrictions, or all of these really interesting components of where people have splintered off, rather than at some point. I think there are many opportunities, of course, and yet many instances where people have been coming together, and yet it's a real roller coaster, and it's a real kind of blender this year, don't you think? With the 5, it's very frenetic energy. So I think all of that is going to kind of come out the chute and come into this new year where it's like, okay, how this is getting serious, people. So how are we going to deal with climate issues? How are we going to deal with inflation? How are we going to deal with all of these things? And how are we going to do this globally? Because I think that what we really are experiencing is an incredibly heightened level of global connectivity. Because in the past, we wouldn't have known what was going on globally, because we wouldn't have the communication tools, we wouldn't have the ability. So it's a very interesting game that we're playing right now. And it can be kind of overwhelming, right?
Right.
That all of this is going on, and yet it's offering us opportunities to truly and collectively come to terms with what next, and how are we going to envision our future. And there, I find that the energy of the 6 is incredibly creative. It's incredibly magnetic. It's incredibly future focused. And so I feel like this is the underlying energy that is going to be pushing a lot of innovation, a lot of new ideas, a lot of new concepts, a lot of new ways, really outside of the box ways. Because I think right now this is kind of a platform, dare I say, where there can be some pretty big leaps where you couldn't make those leaps before, where you'd have to go 1, 2, 3, 4 and get somewhere. I think right now we're in a very interesting phase and stage where there can be some incremental, some less than incremental leaps that are going to move things forward. And there is an urgency behind it right now. So I think as we go in here, and it's going to be a collective choice, do we choose to do this together, or do we choose to, annihilate each other? Do we choose to do this as a global community and as a global family, or do we, lock the door and not allow not allow our siblings in, whatever. Sorry, don't live here anymore. The locks have been changed. So it is that sort of energy and those sorts of thematics that are going to be working through the year. And I just feel like there's a lot going on, again, politically and in every other way, that is pointing us in this direction, that this 6 universal energy is really set up to work with, right? And very, very directly.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds great. It sounds like with the 6 energy coming in and all those 2s, that there is hope for more global cooperation between the countries, instead of, for centuries and centuries, it's all about competition and economic power. It's time that we need to change the way we look at the world. Everybody is in a pandemic. It's not just the United States. The entire world is facing, their own problems in their own countries. And it's fascinating to hear that next year we're bringing in this new energy that, could potentially bring new cooperation and new tools to heal the world and move forward.
Absolutely. And I am always riding the highest formulation and octave of the opportunities. That's something that the numbers bring with them. And yet it's also very good to look at the opposing forces and to look at what we'll be challenged with, because that also is very informative. Because I thought this was supposed to be a real soft and fuzzy year, and it hasn't turned out that way. So one of the darker shadow elements, or the challenging elements to the energy of the number 6, the caveats for the 6 are controlling, perfectionism, and judgment. So it's the 6 holds with it a very high idealistic. That's where the visionary energy comes from. It's idealistic. It can see how the world could be. It can see how the world should be. So, and yet the issue here is that on its more shadow side, it can offer a lot of very brutal non-acceptance. So the 6 is about accepting everyone where they are, having a sense of acceptance, accepting the perfection of the imperfection, right, of how everything is, and moving towards something in the positive realm. And yet again, in its darker form, it's about, okay, everybody, you do as I do, you think as I think, and everyone's going to fall in line, and you're going to do exactly what I tell you. And if not, I will annihilate you. I will crush you. I will not feed you. Right. And so it's one of those that can be an oppositional pull. And we're seeing a lot of that right now, where, on a very personal level, people are losing friendships. People are losing long-time things. Identities are shifting, belief patterns are shifting. Things that people have held dear for very long are kind of being imploded or exploded or revealed to be different right in front of their eyes, right? And we're all really working with this, with adapting right? Adapting
Yeah.
to these new circumstances, to adapting to grieving, mourning, losses and things that are happening in our world. I would say also, again, since the sixth universal year is about home on every level, metaphorically and literally. So it's like our planet is our home. How are we treating it? What's our, do we need a renovation? Is this are we doing proper upkeep, proper care and maintenance of it? Are we tending to the garden? Are we, all of the things that we could put into metaphor that are about our planet as our home. And then from that to the very, very foundational, you, me, everyone individually, I know so many people who are moving from their geographical home. They're moving to a different state. They're moving to a different city. They're moving to a different country. They're changing, they're changing from an apartment to a house or a house to somewhere or whatever. They're changing their concept of home entirely. They're jumping in their conversion van and going off. I mean, these are things that are very real and very dramatic that is supported by the energy of the six. What is home? How do we feel at home? And how do we invite people into our home, or all of those different home-based things that we are going to be dealing with. And then as you were noting with that beautiful energy of the two, which is about the warm and fuzzies and about other people and about supporting and loving and feeding and nurturing. So both of those energies are very much about relationships and about that emotional connection, rather than I don't know, very, very me. It's more about us now. And yet again, the flip side can be that there's a default there that we can go back to. So I would say that is going to be the biggest stumbling block or climbing wall, is going to be really people collectively resorting to, we're right and you're wrong. And people get very, very ensconced in that, stubborn resistance to going, oh, well, hold on a minute. How can we navigate this
Right.
for all of us, right? Yeah.
So you have the good and the positive energy of the six, but then you also have the darker, not so great energy of the six. Mm-hmm. How do we focus to make more of the good part of the six happen versus the not so good part of the six? That's that each person's life path, personal year influencing that, or how does that work?
Absolutely, it does. And I think a good choice to discuss that, so the universal year is the umbrella. So the personal year is more like the individual points of destination that you're going to in your little road trip for the year. And so the personal year, again, you can refer back to that podcast where you and I talk about that very in depth. And that is something that is an energetic container and influence for you personally. So you've got you're in the six, but then you're going to have your day to day, right? So there's a wonderful way of understanding what's going on. But it's one of those things where we can read the news and we could, we're involved on some level, and yet you can't change, you can't single-handedly change the world in that way. So how do you do it in your own world, right? It's bringing it local in that way. So the personal year helps you define that. And yet even more so, I would say, is a really wonderful way of looking at it is to look at your life path number, because in numerology, your life path is very, you can look at it like your sun sign in astrology. It's like if you're a Capricorn or a Leo or a Virgo or whatever you happen to be. And also understanding that that's a one-dimensional, very beginning level, way of looking at your astrological chart. And yet it is a key element, right? It is, if you're only going to know one thing, that's the thing. Same thing with numerology. If you're only going to know one, it is your life path number. And it's a very easy, calculation. So I always like to say that if you're math phobic, it's okay. Numerology can still be your friend. Because I actually, me, math is my nemesis. I don't like math. So it's a cosmic joke that I actually do numerology, but it is a language to me, is what really, really draws me. So if we look at an example, let's do a life path. Do you want to use your birth date? Do you want to use a random birth date?
Sure.
What would you like?
Yeah.
Okay.
Use my birthday.
All right.
It's May 28th. So 5/28, 1958.
Okay. So in numerology, like all other ologies, there are different schools of thought about how to do things. I'm going to demonstrate how I believe the kind of proper, for lack of a better term, way of doing it is, and yet I'll indicate another way to do it that is also a very popular way. The only thing it changes is the double digit that you get prior to reducing it to a one-digit number. So as you get more nuanced with your practice of numerology, if it's something you choose to be interested in, that would make a difference. It would just give you a little bit more information. But for our purposes, it's great to know the one-digit numbers. So in this example, May is 5. It is the 5th month, so that is a number 5. And that's a one-digit number. Awesome. So we're done with that part. Now we're going to take the day. It's the 28th. We're going to add together 2 plus 8. 2 plus 8 is 10. And even though it's 10, you're like, well, I got a 10. You keep reducing. So you go another step further, and 1 plus 0 equals 1. So 28 is a 1. So then this is the hardest part, everyone. So 1958, we're going to add that together. 1 plus 9 is 10, plus 5 is 15. Plus 8 is 23. Is that correct? Yep. And I always say, just like in carpentry, when you measure twice, cut once, in numerology, you add at least twice, because if you're one number off, you're really off. Okay. So 23, 2 plus 3 equals 5. So now we're going to take all three of those numbers and add those together. So 5 plus 1 plus 5. So 5 plus 1 is 6, plus 5 is 11. So that is a number 11. So the sticky wicket here, or the beauty here that we get to talk about for a moment, is that if you get an 11, a 22, or a 33 prior to reducing to a 2 or a 4 or a 6, you have what is considered a master number in numerology. And those have a different sort of significance. And of course, if you have one, be careful what you wish for. We can talk with you, Dr. Lottie, about that. It's higher spiritual potential and some more challenges.
I hope you enjoyed listening to this episode of Dr. Lottie, Science with Soul. To stay up to date on future episodes and to help us reach a larger audience, remember to subscribe, review, and share this podcast, as well as subscribing to my newsletter at divinespiritualessence.com. If you are a person who understands the interconnectedness of mind, body, and soul, and would like to take one of my courses or work with me to create a path of healing your own life, please visit divinespiritualessence.com or drlottie.com. My book, Med School After Menopause, The Journey of My Soul, an inspirational story about transformation, healing, and spirituality, which won first place in the category of spiritual leadership in August 2021 from Living Now Book Awards, is available online at Amazon as well as other online platforms worldwide. If you are a person who understands the interconnectedness of mind, body, and soul, and would like to take one of my courses or work with me, To create a path of healing your own life, please visit divinespiritualessence.com or drlottie.com.